The Apple QuickTake was great in many ways, so why did they kill it in only 3 years? Also, how well do these 0.3 megapixel cameras actually work? Let's find out. Hey everyone, how are you all doing? If you're new here, welcome. My name is Krazy Ken, and wow, we have a lot to be grateful for. Smartphone camera technology is amazing, but in the mid-90s, if you could shoot and store 8 0.3 megapixel color images onto a 1 megabyte chip for under $1,000, it was almost like magic. And that's exactly what the QuickTake achieved. So why kill it off? We'll explore all of that and much more, but first, let's learn about the origins of the very first QuickTake. Our story starts with this man. His name is Steve Sasson, and he was a Kodak electrical engineer. In December 1975, Steve developed a CCD-based digital camera prototype which captured black and white photos at a 100 by 100 resolution onto a cassette tape. That's a whopping 0.001 megapixels. This prototype primed the pump for digital photography, but progress accelerated a lot faster when Sony introduced their first Mavica prototype in 1981. Despite the Mavica not releasing commercially until 1987, the race was officially on. In 1991, Kodak publicly launched the digital camera system, later referred to as DCS-100. This beast combined a Nikon F3 film camera body, a Kodak 1.3 megapixel color CCD, and a 200 megabyte external digital storage unit which could hold 160 uncompressed images. And if you wanted this thing, it would set you back $20,000. It was certainly not a consumer product. Fast forwarding, other companies launched their own digital cameras, including the Fujix DS-1P and Dicam Model 1. Digital camera technology was growing and all of these products were hitting the market. So now, we arrive at the QuickTake. The QuickTake's development started in 1990 with a member of Apple's advanced technology group, Eric Anderson. Over 2 years, he developed a prototype digital camera named Ansel Adam. It was a handheld device which attached to a Macintosh computer, and this prototype was presented to Kodak in Rochester. They will play an important role in this product, so we'll come back to them in a second. By mid-1992, Ansel Adam evolved into a new product codenamed Venus. This product aimed to be a self-contained camera, no tethered computer needed. For the industrial design, Apple's Mark Vonderlo led the project along with Tim Parsi and Dave Shen. Their goal was to give Venus's design icon status and make it so the product could be used with only one hand, horizontally and vertically. Also, they wanted to make the experience as uncomplicated as possible, and that includes minimal moving parts, i.e. not needing to tilt or move viewfinders or flash attachments. Thanks to Paul Kunkel's and Rick English's Apple design book, we can peer into what the designers were thinking and how those thoughts forged the QuickTake prototype, and we can also see how things were refined over time. Compared to the production unit, this model has 5 buttons on the back instead of 4, and they are smaller. There's also an additional button beneath the shutter release button, but I have no idea what it does. And finally, the timer light is thinner. There's also no QuickTake 100 name present, but that's common for prototypes. The Venus project was eventually transferred to Apple's imaging group, and that team collaborated with Kodak to further the development. In Venus's final iteration, the camera would use a Kodak Color CCD sensor, which was a lower cost variation of the higher res sensor used in the DCS-200 cameras. Now, Apple needed a manufacturer for the camera, and they selected Shinon from Japan. Shinon manufactured the optics and the internal electronics, except for the sensor stuff that fell under Kodak's jurisdiction. By October 1993, public rumors spread through the grapevine about Apple, Kodak, and Shinon working together. Of course, this wasn't a literal grapevine because that would be an impractical form of communication. Also, at this time, many digital cameras were already hitting the market at more expensive prices, so people were speculating Apple's camera might cost less. Could that be true? Could there be trade-offs with that? Not sure. But, good news. We don't have to wait much longer. Macworld Tokyo, February 16th, 1994. On this day, Apple officially announced its first digital camera product, the QuickTake 100. And in March, it shipped for $749, making it one of the very first color digital cameras to sell for under $1,000. The design is lightweight, weighing only 1.14 pounds with the battery and neck strap installed. and it's 2.2 inches high, 5.3 inches wide, and 6.1 inches deep. On the front is the main lens, which has a sliding door to protect it, and this door also functions as the power switch. There's also a built-in flash with a max range of 9 feet. Next to the flash is the front side of the optical viewfinder, along with dual light sensors for auto exposure, and the timer light. On the back is the viewfinder with eye cup, control panel display, and 4 control buttons: flash, resolution, 10-second timer, and a very tiny button for erasing the camera's memory, which you need to use a pen or a paperclip to push. On the right is the battery compartment, which takes 3 AA batteries, and on the left side is this fancy sliding door, which reveals a power jack for an optional AC adapter, and the 8-pin mini-DIN serial port for transferring photos to your computer. The bottom contains a threaded hole for a tripod mount, and on top is the shutter button. I'd like to circle back to the viewfinder for a second, because with modern technology, I'm guessing we mostly forgot about the struggle with these things. Optical viewfinders on point-and-shoot cameras do not line up with the lens, meaning the framing you see in the viewfinder will not be exactly how the lens and sensor, or film, see it. In the case of the QuickTake 100, the center of the lens is approximately 2 inches to the right of the center of the viewfinder. This means when you frame a subject, you will have to move the QuickTake about 2 inches to your left to compensate. This is the great benefit in SLR and DSLR cameras, because what the photographer sees in the viewfinder is exactly what the lens sees. Single lens reflex or digital single lens reflex cameras use a mirror and a pentaprism to direct the light coming in from the lens to the viewfinder, and when the shutter is fired, the mirror moves up and the light hits the film or the sensor. In other words, the lens shares its perspective with the viewfinder and the sensor or film. They're the same. There is no misalignment. Mirrorless cameras achieve the same objective, but without mirrors. Instead, they feed the real-time image electronically to the camera's screen or the camera's EVF, electronic viewfinder. Whether you use an SLR, DSLR, mirrorless, or heck, even a smartphone camera, you won't have those alignment issues because of the way they're built, unlike the QuickTake 100. But again, this thing only cost $749 and it was $1994, so you weren't expecting DSLR features in such a tiny and cheap package. Next, we're going to take a look at the QuickTake 100 specs right after this quick break. Opera. I used to use Opera back in the day when I was just a little Ken, and I wanted to check out what they've been up to lately. And they've been cooking. So let's take a closer look. I remember I first used Opera because of the themes, and with Opera's latest update, their customization still comes through. Opera also comes with a built-in music player, so you can control your music and videos without having to leave the current task you're doing or reach for your phone. You have 7 different streaming services to choose from. You can even pop the player out into a floating window and move it anywhere you'd like, inside or completely outside the browser. Also, if you're someone who loves lots of tabs, the Tab Traces feature will help you easily spot which ones you've recently used, thanks to a subtle underline. And you can combine tabs into a single window with split screen, which is great for comparing documents and other tasks. Just drag the tab down to split it into 2. Opera also includes Aria, an AI feature built into the browser. You can open it from the handy command line, just hit Command / or Control / to bring it up, and ask away. No switching tabs needed. Aria can answer questions, summarize pages, and help you with writing. You can also upload images, and Aria will help you identify subjects and information. So click the link in the description to download Opera and upgrade your browsing experience. And when you do that, you're also supporting the Computer Clan, so thank you very much. Now, let's dive into the QuickTake 100 specs. The lens physical focal length is 8mm, which would be a really wide angle of view on a normal 35mm or full-frame camera, but because the sensor is so tiny, the high crop factor equates this 8mm focal length to a 50mm effective focal length. This angle of view might seem a little tight to some people, but you're not photographing close-ups with this thing. It's more for subjects further away, groups of people, buildings. You're not going to photograph close-ups with this. You could try, but the minimum focusing distance is 4 feet, so if you're closer than that, the subject's gonna come out blurry. In a later update, Apple released an accessory to make close-ups possible, but we'll talk about that soon. Again, this is a simple point-and-shoot camera. Just aim, press the shutter button, and you're done. So, for the sake of simplicity, the exposure was completely automatic. The shutter speed ranges from 1/30th of a second to 1/175th of a second. Faster shutter means less light and less motion blur. A longer shutter means more light and more motion blur. And the aperture ranges from f2.8 to f16. Lower f number means a more open aperture and more light, and a higher f number means a more closed aperture and less light. For resolution, the sensor was, get ready, 0.3 megapixels. That's 640 by 480 resolution in this case. For comparison, the very first iPhone with that tiny camera had about 6.6 times the resolution in 2007. And 0.3 megapixels was at high resolution. If you set the camera to standard resolution mode, your pictures save at 320 by 240, 0.0768 megapixels. Wow, camera technology has come so far. But on the bright side, no matter which resolution mode you use, the pictures still save in 24-bit color. So that's approximately 16 million colors. That's kinda nice. Another cool feature worth mentioning, this camera had iCloud integration, so you could take thousands of photos and they would automatically back up to the cloud for you. I'm kidding. It has 1 megabyte of storage. Specifically, it was a 1 megabyte internal flash EEPROM chip, which could store 32 standard resolution photos and 8 high-resolution photos, and the memory could hold them for up to a year. In certain earlier digital cameras, the memory was volatile, so if the batteries were removed, the photos would vanish. But don't worry, that won't happen with the QuickTake. Now, like a film camera, you couldn't review the photos you shot on the camera itself. There was no screen to do that. That also means you can't select an individual photo and reshoot it if you need to. You could only erase the whole memory, not individual pictures. We need a way to offload them to a computer so we can start over again, erase the camera and start fresh. Well, that's where the serial port and the QuickTake software come into play. The QuickTake 1.0 software comes on 2 floppy disks, or 3 if you need the Power Macintosh disk. And after the installation, you can use the QuickTake Setup control panel to connect your QuickTake 100 to your Mac via the serial cable. You can also use it to set the camera's name, clock, and sleep time. Alright, let's connect. Well, okay, normally you can use this control panel to connect your QuickTake, but it keeps freezing my Mac completely. Plan B. I connected the QuickTake to my Molar Mac running the 2.0 software and transferred the files to a floppy disk. Now I can use this floppy disk on the original Mac I was trying to use and demo the 1.0 software. When you double-click a QuickTake picture, it opens in the QuickTake software. This software allows you to edit photos, change bit depth, print, and export into PICT and TIFF formats. You can also use the QuickTake software to import the pictures to your hard disk, but you can also simply drag and drop pictures off the camera too. Now let's take a look at the QuickTake 2.0 software, which came bundled with a future camera. The 2.0 control panel offered the same features as before, however it was now named Image Access instead of Setup. The big difference with the 2.0 software package is Photo Flash, an image editing and cataloging application made by Storm Software and Apple. Photo Flash gives users many photo editing features: blur, sharpen, crop, resize, lasso, magic wand, and color adjustments. But I'm not done yet! Photo Flash is not just an editor, it's a catalog with search features, which were largely, if not entirely, made possible thanks to Storm Software. Now you can organize and search through your photos. You can even search by drawing a sketch, which technically sounds amazing, but I don't find it accurate or useful. Anyway, this 2.0 software package debuted with a new camera called the QuickTake 150. So let's take a look at that now. Yeah, there really wasn't anything different on the outside. On April 17th, 1995, Apple launched the QuickTake 150. The 150 used the same design as the 100, and overall the physical features were the same. However, it now included a snap-on close-up lens and flash diffuser. But the big change was in the firmware. The 150 used new compression technology to store many more photos on the same 1 megabyte of storage. And to top it off, Apple bumped down the price from $749 to $739. Yeah, we'll give you a good price, because you're good people. Apply now for 0% APR financing. Hey, if you can finance Taco Bell, why not finance a digital camera? Hey, what gives, Apple? I just bought this QuickTake 100 a year ago, and now you release a new model? Give it to me! Don't worry, entitled customer. Apple has you covered. In August 1995, Apple started offering a factory upgrade for the 100, named 100 Plus. For $200, you can send in your QuickTake 100, Apple will upgrade the internals, and boom, you now have a 100 Plus. So now, we arrive at the QuickTake 200, and Apple has some exciting changes in store. On March 1st, 1997, Apple launched the QuickTake 200 for $600, and it featured an all-new design, which is more, not sure how else to say this, camera-shaped? And yes, it now has a screen. For this model, Apple and Kodak parted ways, and instead, Apple worked with Fujifilm for the QuickTake 200's design. The 200 was based on Fujifilm's DS8 camera, or DS7 depending on who you ask. And fun fact, Samsung also jumped in on this Fuji design for the Kinox SSC 350N. Just rolls off the tongue. On the front is the 5.7mm Fujinon lens, which is equivalent to 38mm, and on the back is a 1.8-inch LCD, which lets you review your photos after taking them, but it's also a 30 FPS real-time viewfinder. This screen will fix the alignment issue we talked about earlier, but if you do want to use an optical viewfinder, Apple included one, so I don't even know how this goes on because I never give a crap about it. Yeah, something like that. Oh gosh. On the left side, behind a rubber door, is a 6-volt DC power jack for an optional AC adapter. There's also composite video out and a serial jack for connecting the camera to your computer. Specifically, Apple calls this jack the digital port, and it works with the included Macintosh serial cable. However, it's not a typical Mac serial cable with the 8-pin mini DIN pinout. The end that plugs into the computer uses that pinout, but the camera end uses a 2.5mm TRS configuration. On the right side is a textured grip and door for the memory card slot. Apple included a 2MB card with the QuickTake 200, and while the manual just calls it a storage card, probably for simplicity, it's specifically a 5-volt smart media card. Look at that. Nice and thin. The 2MB card could store 30 good quality pictures or 20 high quality pictures. And they save in the JPEG format, not the proprietary QuickTake format from earlier. On the bottom is the tripod mount, LCD brightness dial, and the battery compartment. And on top we have lots of controls, definitely more than on the 100. The two I want to talk about specifically are the aperture selector and focus selector. The aperture on the previous QuickTake models was fully automatic, but now you have two manual options, f2.2 for more light, or f8 for less light. And with the 200, the focus modes were now built in. You didn't have to carry around and snap on a separate lens anymore. And then we have the mode dial. Let's take it for a spin. Computer mode for importing photos, self-timer for a 10-second timer, record mode for good quality pictures, record fine mode for high quality pictures, play mode for reviewing images on the LCD, auto playback mode for playing a slideshow, and this mode works with that video out port for television playback, protect mode to prevent photos from being erased, and finally, erase mode. This mode lets you erase all images on the card or format the card. But unlike previous QuickTake models, you can now select individual photos to erase, which is super helpful if you need to retake a shot and save some space. The shutter speed was still completely automatic. It ranged from 1/4 of a second to 1/5000th of a second. There's one more feature I want to show, and it has to do with the video out port. You can send a live video signal through this port, so if you connect your camera to the AV card on your Macintosh, for example, you can record your face directly into other applications or video conferencing software. Pretty cool, right? So, here I am. Just a man trapped 10 stories underground, still, with these two amazing QuickTake cameras. But the question is, how well do they actually work? To test them out, I'm gonna have to escape to the surface and actually photograph some things. And you're coming with me. This is non-negotiable. Let's go. Here we are, Dallas, Chicago. I'm going to go on a photo walk in the city and some other locations in an effort to find cool subjects to photograph, and I'll see how well I can work with the limitations of these cameras. Let's have some fun. It was extremely fun taking photos with the QuickTake 100, and even when I'm not taking photos, I just like holding this thing. Seriously, it feels really nice. It's just fun to look at too. It has such a unique form factor. It really should be in the Museum of Modern Art or something. Oh, it is. Nice. Fun stuff aside, it was definitely a challenge to resist taking a bunch of photos of other subjects I wanted to capture. I really had to ration my digital film. And with faster subjects, I would usually use my camera on burst mode so I could take a bunch of pictures really rapidly, but that's not happening with the QuickTake 100. Yeah, the limited storage space is a factor there, but also there's about a 6-second loading time between each shot you take, so bursting is pretty much impossible. As for the image quality, I say they look pretty darn good for a cheap digital camera from 1994. Yes, the pixel count is small, but it wasn't too abnormal for that time. And you gotta keep in mind, megapixels aren't a direct measure of quality. It's just a number telling you the amount of pixels in a photo. Many other quality aspects of the photo are alright. There's definitely some weak spots. If you're in a location with lots of bright and dark regions, the dynamic range will not keep up, resulting in clipped whites and/or blacks. But the built-in flash can help in some of those scenarios. But I recommend having the flash off most of the time, especially indoors, because it just makes the subject look kind of flat. Also, just from an artistic perspective, if you want to create that flash 90s nostalgic kind of look, turn the flash on. Go ahead. Flash everybody. Okay, not like that. I also noticed some pixelation along edges. I'm guessing this is aliasing, like you see with some 3D graphics in video games sometimes. There's just not enough resolution to smooth out these curves, and it doesn't appear there's any on-device algorithms to perform anti-aliasing. The end result is some curvy shapes look a little jagged, even when viewed at the normal 640 by 480 resolution. I also noticed some pixels showed inaccurate color. Like in this sunset photo, there's red speckles everywhere. But at least the lens flare is pretty. Also, low light is non-existent. Can you find the dog in this picture? Again, that's where the flash could be useful. I tried it again with an inanimate object and a tripod, and no, still very dark. And if you want to turn on that flash, the lighting will be flat, like we discussed earlier, but hey, at least you can see the subject. Another thing I noticed is the color balance can be a bit wonky sometimes, but it doesn't always happen. This test photo was shot under daylight LEDs, yet the photo is tinted green, and my black conversion technology shirt appears magenta tinted under direct sunlight. Now let's step things up and take some photos with the 200. Having a higher storage capacity and the option to delete individual photos made things easier while traveling. I didn't have to worry so much about running out of storage space. And having the different focus modes was also super handy, so I could photograph far subjects as well as close-ups easily. This flower, I think, turned out really nice. Heck, we even achieved some shallow depth of field with this lens. There's still some digital artifacts occurring, but they tend to look a bit neater compared to the 100, like with this Apple logo. Also, when shooting close-ups, sometimes it's a bit hard to tell what's in focus because the screen is just so tiny and it has a low angle of view. So that takes a little bit of practice. Color balance also seems to be more accurate, like with my shirt and this test setup. However, the color balance completely took a crap on itself with this aerial photo. The 200 is very warm, whereas the older 100 actually looks more true to life. Weird. I also noticed the QuickTake 200's noise is kind of obnoxious compared to the 100. The 100 noise seems to be a bit cleaner and somewhat film-like, but the 200 seems to have lines of noise mixed in. Thankfully, that issue doesn't plague every photo. It's not always very obvious, and I showed some samples to other people, and they either couldn't see the lines at all or they had to look really closely. So I think for your normal consumer using this camera, that type of noise issue won't be a problem. Noise aside, the 200's details overall look a little bit better and a little bit crispier than the 100. For low light, I found it nearly impossible to photograph a moving subject like this doggy. The automatic shutter would slow down too much, which, yes, helps more light hit the sensor, but it also captures more motion blur. Like with the 100, I tried an inanimate object and a tripod for more low light testing. And it worked decently, many times better than the 100, and I'm guessing that's because the shutter can slow down to 1/4 of a second, which lets a lot more light hit the sensor compared to the QuickTake 100's 1/30th of a second. For some extra fun, I wanted to compare some QuickTake photos against my iPhone 14 Pro. It blows my freaking mind how far phototech has come, and how miniaturized it is today. Yeah, that's all the QuickTake cameras. I hope you enjoyed. At least, I thought that was all the QuickTake cameras. There's one more QuickTake model that is often forgotten about, and probably for a good reason. It was never released. Introducing the QuickTake 1000 prototype. Apple was working on this model before the QuickTake 200's redesign came out, and this is evident by the design looking like a wider QuickTake 100. This model was going to feature a PowerPC processor with much faster performance and a motorized zoom lens with rocker control. But in the end, this design was scrapped in favor of the more conventional design of the 200. So, I believe that leaves us with two remaining questions. And the first one is, why did the QuickTake line die so young? I have bad news and good news. We'll start with the bad news first. The digital camera market was still young. In 1997, about 1.2 million digital cameras were sold worldwide, which was dwarfed by the amount of film cameras. So the QuickTake was already facing this tremendous obstacle, which was the larger film camera market. Not to mention, competitive SLR cameras sold at a lower price too. And with digital cameras being so new to the tech space, use cases weren't fully adopted by the public yet. The good news is, QuickTake sold well in education and small business markets, and QuickTake's market share was greater than all other digital cameras combined at the time. It appears QuickTake claimed a large slice of the pie, but the pie was still very small. This brings us to the main reason the QuickTake died young. Apple killed it on purpose. Wait, why? New products are always going to have struggles, so why not give QuickTake a chance to grow along with the market? It appears Apple actually wanted to give the QuickTake more time to grow. During Apple's Worldwide Developers Conference in May 1997, Phil Schiller implied the QuickTake is staying in the product line.
And then image capture, or the QuickTake camera, will continue to be a very unique device going forward for bringing in imagery to QuickTime, and actually also work with software to make it easier to post high-quality images straight up to the web.
Unfortunately, time was not on Apple's side, because in only 4 months, new leadership would take over the company. Apple was in big financial trouble in the 90s, and while they never officially declared bankruptcy, the company at one point was only 3 months away from insolvency. However, on February 7th, 1997, just 10 days before the QuickTake 200 was announced, Apple completed the acquisition of Next and brought back key co-founder and visionary Steve Jobs. And after Steve was appointed interim CEO in September, he and his team formed a new product strategy to help get Apple healthy again. Their main focus at the time was not on cameras, it was on the Macintosh computer and Mac OS, and they narrowed down the product strategy to 4 products: a consumer Mac, a professional Mac, and desktop and laptop versions of each. During this pivotal change at the company, many product lines got the axe, including the Pippin, the Mac Clones program, the Newton line, and the QuickTake. Even the Advanced Technology Group was shut down, which is where the QuickTake prototype was born in the first place. So this leads us to the final question. Was QuickTake actually a failure? If you look at some web articles that like to emphasize Apple's past failures, you might see the QuickTake pop up. But I think more often than not, this is an exaggeration. In my opinion, the QuickTake is good. The image quality was decent for the time and the price, and the features introduced in the 200 at a lower price were great additions. And again, it sold well in some markets. So no, I don't think the QuickTake failed because it was never given a fair chance to grow. Heck, even the iPod, which became very big and very famous, didn't start gaining traction until the 3rd generation. 3 years is really not a lot of time to evolve a product. But I get it. At the time, it was not in Apple's best interest to keep selling it. So maybe we could say it flopped? I like to say flopped sometimes because it's just a less harsh word than fail. After the restructuring, Apple never made a dedicated digital photo camera again. But that's okay, because Apple's focus for camera technology lies primarily within the iPhone, which are in use by about 1.3 billion people worldwide. As for Mark, he continued working at Apple for another year, and he worked on the original iMac too, which was a huge design undertaking. His name is even on the computer enclosure patent, and he is currently the design director and founding president of Abstract Form. Now, I know I said the QuickTake died young, but in a way, part of it never truly died, because some of its DNA still lives inside the iPhone. When Apple introduced the iPhone 11, they demoed a new feature that lets you record video without having to switch from photo mode into video mode. Simply hold down the shutter button to start recording a video. And they named this new feature QuickTake. So, there you have it, folks. The story of the pretty awesome, but quite short-lived QuickTake. I love sharing these stories with you, so I hope you had fun along the way. So now, go out and take some photos with whatever camera you've got. I'm going to do the same thing, but before you go, let me just grab one of you quick. Yeah. Oh yeah, you look amazing in 640 by 480 resolution. Catch the Krazy and pass it on. Do I look like I know what a JPEG is? I just want a picture of a goddamn hot dog.